Tehran. The night of July 31st, 2024. In the northern part of the capital, among quiet villas and heavily guarded residences, stands a guest house known as Mossad. It is here, far from Gaza, that Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, is staying as an honored guest. The clock passes midnight. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a powerful blast. The building shakes, windows shatter, and within moments, confusion spreads through the compound. When the dust settles, one fact becomes clear: Ismail Haniyeh is no more. For Iran, the incident was a deep embarrassment. It took place in the very heart of Tehran, inside a facility controlled by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Even more unsettling was the method. Not an airstrike, not a missile, but a concealed explosive device planted inside the building despite the layers of security. This was a hallmark of Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, known worldwide for operations carried out with precision and daring. Where protection seems absolute, they manage to find a way. Where their target feels most secure, they quietly prepare the decisive blow. What exactly unfolded that night? By what means was one of the most closely guarded figures in the region eliminated? And why does Iran continue to avoid acknowledging the full story behind the event? To understand why the whole world was talking about his death, we need to go back to the very beginning. Ismail Haniyeh was born in 1962 in the Shati refugee camp on the Gaza coast. It was a place where children grew up among cramped concrete blocks, poverty, and a constant sense of loss. Every family lived with the memory of homes abandoned by their parents or grandparents in Israel. In such conditions, a new generation was raised with anger and a thirst for revenge. As a child, Haniyeh was no different from other boys. He played football on sandy lots, helped his family, and dreamed of a simple life. Everything changed when he enrolled at the Islamic University of Gaza. There, he was introduced to the ideas of political Islam and met Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the man who founded Hamas. That meeting became a turning point. The modest student quickly transformed into Yassin's closest aide and disciple. After Yassin's assassination by Israel in 2004, Haniyeh's career rose rapidly. By 2006, Hamas had unexpectedly won the elections, and Haniyeh even became prime minister. At that time, many in Israel considered him merely a politician, a negotiator, a talking head, nothing like the hardened field commanders. But time changed everything. Haniyeh grew closer to Iran, Hezbollah, and other radical groups. He was not directly commanding fighters, but he became the key link, the man pulling the diplomatic strings that tied Gaza, Tehran, Damascus, and Beirut into a single network. The turning point came on October 7, 2023. Thousands of Hamas militants broke through Israel's border, carrying out massacres and taking hostages. The planning happened in Gaza, but the political face of the attack was Haniyeh. From the luxury halls of Qatar, he smiled into the cameras and called the events a victory. For Israel, this was the breaking point. From that moment on, he was no longer seen as a politician. He became the symbol of terror, the man justifying killings and dictating terms while hundreds of families waited in agony for news of their kidnapped relatives. That is why Haniyeh's arrival in Tehran in the summer of 2024 for the inauguration of Iran's new president, Mossad carried such weight. For Iran, he was not just a guest, but an ally, seated in the front rows as a symbol of resistance. But this very display made him the #1 target. Israel seemed to answer with a challenge. You call him your friend? We'll prove that even under your protection, he is not safe. And on the night of July 31st, 2024, an explosion in northern Tehran confirmed it, ending Ismail Haniyeh's path and opening a new chapter in the confrontation between Israel and Iran. Late July. Tehran was heavy with summer heat that lingered long after the sun went down. The city still bore traces of the day's official ceremonies, banners celebrating the inauguration of President Mossad, posters peeling on walls, and the fading echoes of music from earlier festivities. Yet in the quieter northern districts, a different mood prevailed. Tense, expectant, almost uneasy. Among the many guests who had traveled to Iran for the occasion was Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas. His presence in Tehran was more than protocol. It was a statement. By hosting him so prominently, Iranian leaders were signaling the strength of their ties with Hamas and other members of what they call the Axis of Resistance. After the ceremonies, Haniyeh was escorted to a secure residence in the upscale Sa'adat district. The compound, operated by the Revolutionary Guard, was not a palace but a heavily reinforced guest house. Access was tightly restricted, and the location was treated as confidential. For Haniyeh, it appeared to be one of the safest places outside of Gaza, or Qatar. The evening passed in routine. He met briefly with aides, spoke via secure lines with contacts abroad, and reviewed updates from Gaza. Guards moved steadily through the courtyard, projecting vigilance and discipline. To an outside observer, the compound looked impenetrable. But the real danger was not approaching from the skies or the streets. It was already inside. Just before midnight, Haniyeh retired to his quarters. The building grew quiet. Guards at their posts remained alert, unaware that their security could not prevent what was about to unfold. Then, at around 1:30 a.m., the silence was shattered. A powerful blast tore through the guest house, shaking the northern district and sending debris into the night air. Fire and smoke poured from Haniyeh's private room. Within moments, it was clear that the guest of honor had been fatally struck. In the confusion that followed, initial statements from Hamas and Iranian officials described the incident as the result of an external airstrike. The explanation was quick and straightforward, meant to reassure the public. Yet even in those first chaotic hours, observers questioned how such an event could have happened inside one of the most secure compounds in Tehran, and why the damage pointed not to an attack from above, but to something hidden within the walls. Soon after the events in Tehran, Western media began to present their own versions of what had taken place. One of the first and most widely cited was a report in the New York Times, followed by other international outlets. The common theme was clear. Ismail Haniyeh's death was not the result of an external strike, but of a carefully prepared intelligence operation carried out with precision. According to these accounts, an explosive device had been planted in Haniyeh's room well before his arrival. His visit to Tehran was expected, and preparations had been underway for weeks, if not months. Different versions circulated. Some suggested the device was hidden inside the furniture, others that it was concealed within his bedding. In either case, it was placed in a spot where no one would normally suspect danger. The mechanism reportedly remained inactive until confirmation was received that Haniyeh himself had entered the room. Only then was the detonation command sent. The setup was designed to limit collateral damage, calculated to target only the intended individual without affecting others nearby. Analysts noted that this scenario closely matched the style long associated with Mossad. Over decades, Israeli intelligence has been known for operations that combine deep preparation, covert infiltration, and exact timing, waiting patiently for the right conditions before acting with near-surgical accuracy. Whether hidden in a pillow or a sofa, the device became a symbol of that approach, not just an act of elimination, but a message. The implication was that even in one of the most secure guest houses in Tehran, under the protection of allies, safety could not be taken for granted. To many observers, the story read like a scene from a spy novel. Yet precisely because of that familiarity, the hallmarks of discretion, patience, and precision, it was considered credible. For outside analysts, the method bore a signature that was difficult to mistake. Plans to target Ismail Haniyeh had been circulating long before his trip to Tehran. After the events of October 7th, Israeli intelligence reportedly placed his name near the top of their priority list. The debate was never if such an operation would happen, but when and where. Qatar, where Haniyeh lived permanently, was not an option. Doha was involved in delicate negotiations over hostages, and any strike there would have disrupted the entire diplomatic process. Other locations were considered: Turkey, Moscow, Tehran. But Ankara was led by the unpredictable Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Moscow by Vladimir Putin, and Israel could not risk a direct confrontation with either of them. That left Iran. Another factor tilted the decision. Each time Haniyeh visited Tehran, he stayed in the same residence, an IRGC guest compound in the elite Sa'adat district. That repetition created a pattern, and patterns are vulnerabilities. For Israel, it meant a rare opportunity to study his routes, routines, and even the layout of the building in advance. The first chance appeared in May 2024 when Haniyeh attended the funeral of President Ibrahim Raisi. But the timing was judged too risky, as civilians were nearby. The plan was shelved until late July when he returned for the inauguration of President Masoud Pezeshkian. According to Western media reports, that was when a device was discreetly planted inside his quarters. It was not large, but designed precisely, powerful enough to target only the occupant without endangering those in neighboring rooms. Everything was set, and then a small and unexpected twist nearly disrupted months of preparation. On the night before the explosion, the air conditioner in his bedroom stopped working. In the sweltering Tehran heat, Haniyeh left the room for an extended period. For those behind the operation, it raised the nightmare scenario. If he were relocated to another suite, the mission could collapse entirely. But IRGC technicians eventually repaired the system, and he returned. At 1:30 a.m., the device was activated. The blast tore through the outer wall, shaking the compound and ending Haniyeh's life. His close associate, Khalil al-Hayya, confronted with the immediate aftermath, was left in disbelief. For Tehran, the shock went beyond the loss itself. It struck at the prestige of the security services. In the first minutes, confusion reigned. Ismail Haniyeh, commander of the Quds Force, reportedly called Supreme Leader Khamenei to report that an Israeli missile had hit the building. But within hours, evidence pointed to something far more troubling. The source of the attack had been inside, not outside. That realization fueled suspicion and panic. Who could have provided assistance? Was it IRGC staff, outside contractors, or someone from Haniyeh's own circle? No answers have been made public to this day. Analysts agree on one point: an operation of this scale would have been almost impossible without internal help. Iran's leadership delayed immediate retaliation while it investigated the breach. Only on October 1st did Tehran launch missiles toward Israel, most of which were intercepted by Israel's air defenses with U.S. and Jordanian support. Meanwhile, the political bureau of Hamas was taken over by Yahya Sinwar, widely described as one of the architects of the October 7th assault. His tenure, however, proved short. On October 16th, he was killed in Rafah during an Israeli operation. The Tehran incident entered history not only as an example of Mossad's operational reach, but also as a reminder of how fragile events can be. Sometimes the fate of entire regions can hinge not on long-term strategies, but on something as trivial as a broken air conditioner. A small mishap that almost overturned months of preparation. As smoke still hung over the neighborhood, Tehran wasted no time. The Revolutionary Guard rushed out a statement. Haniyeh's home, they claimed, had been struck from beyond the city. A short-range missile, packed with 7 kilos of explosives, had pierced the capital's skies and detonated on target. In this telling, there were no infiltrators, no hidden bomb under the bed. Just an enemy strike, sudden, violent, unmistakably an act of war. For the domestic audience, it was a far easier story to accept. Security had not failed. Mossad had not slipped into Tehran's most guarded district. Instead, Israel had fired from afar. The message was blunt. Yes, the enemy attacked. But he never got inside. This version turned Haniyeh's death into a tale of open battle, not a humiliating breach of Iran's defenses. Yet outside Iran, the doubts came fast. How could a missile slice into downtown Tehran, evade radar, and kill only one man inside the house? On that question, the regime has stayed silent ever since. If the Western account is true, the implications for Tehran are devastating. Think about it. Mossad agents didn't just slip across the border. They penetrated deep inside Iran, into a building guarded at the highest level, where the leader of Hamas was supposed to stay. They entered his private quarters, planted explosives, and walked away without triggering a single alarm. This points to only one conclusion: Israel has collaborators inside Iran's own system. Insiders who arranged logistics, opened doors, and provided intelligence. For the IRGC, which prides itself on being untouchable, such a breach is nothing short of humiliation. If even the bedroom of a top guest can be infiltrated, then nowhere in Iran can truly be considered safe. That's why the missile strike story became so useful. It directs attention outward, a foreign attack, not an inside betrayal. The enemy struck from outside is far easier to admit than Mossad agents are moving around freely in our capital. In the end, this is not about how the blast happened, but about image and survival. Accepting the Western version would shatter public trust in the IRGC and prove to the world that Iran's defenses are riddled with cracks at the very core. The morning after the explosion turned into a day of mourning for Iran's leadership. In a Tehran mosque, the funeral prayer for Ismail Haniyeh was led by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei himself. It was a symbolic gesture, the country's supreme leader personally paying respects to an ally who had become a central figure in regional politics. Haniyeh's body was later flown to Qatar, the country where he had lived in recent years and from where he had conducted political activity on behalf of Hamas. There, a public funeral was held. Large crowds took to the streets, waving Palestinian and Qatari flags and voicing calls for continued resistance. For Palestinians, he was presented as a martyr. For Iranians, his death symbolized a major blow to their influence in the region. Within a single day, Hezbollah, Iran, and Hamas all issued statements promising a response. Observers around the world grew concerned. Would this spark a new escalation across the Middle East? The timing made the situation even more tense. On the very same day in Beirut, Fuad Shukr, a senior Hezbollah military figure, was also killed. 2 losses in a single moment, hitting 2 pillars of the so-called axis of resistance. For many analysts, it became evident this was not accidental, but a coordinated series of operations meant to demonstrate both Israel's intelligence capabilities and its determination. In the hidden world of intelligence, the downfall of a leader rarely comes by chance. It is almost always the result of a single miscalculation, a flaw in judgment that adversaries are quick to exploit. For Ismail Haniyeh, that flaw was not just the skill of his opponents, but his own misplaced confidence. Haniyeh's greatest error was trust. He relied completely on the layers of security provided by his Iranian hosts. He trusted the familiar faces of guards, drivers, and aides around him. And above all, he trusted Tehran's reputation, believing it to be the safest place for him outside of Gaza. That sense of security turned into a weakness, creating the opening his adversaries needed. Unlike leaders who take extra precautions, Haniyeh did not insist on an independent inspection of his residence. He did not bring additional safeguards from abroad, nor did he order multiple layers of checks. Instead, he accepted the accommodation as it was offered, convinced that allies' protection was enough. For intelligence agencies, this type of complacency is the very moment they wait for. Another key mistake was predictability. His schedule was fixed: ceremonies, photographs, formal meetings, and an overnight stay at a familiar location. Each stop on the itinerary had been arranged well in advance. For those planning an operation, such predictability is not routine. It is an opportunity. Finally, there was the element of symbolism. To Haniyeh, the visit was more than diplomacy. It was a stage. He wanted to be seen alongside Iranian leaders, a living symbol of unity and resistance. But symbolism often carries risk. The more visible a figure becomes, the easier it is for others to track his every step. These miscalculations did not happen in isolation. They connected like links in a chain, each tightening around him. By the time the plan was carried out, the outcome was already set. His adversaries did not need to outwit Tehran's entire security system. They only needed Haniyeh to believe, for a few days, that he was completely untouchable. In the world of espionage, such a belief can be the most dangerous mistake of all. After the elimination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Middle East seemed to stand on the edge of a new conflict. Within hours, Ayatollah Khamenei called for a direct response against Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu, in turn, warned of a possible preemptive strike. The so-called axis of resistance, from Hezbollah to Hamas, promised retaliation, while Tehran's newspapers even urged action against American interests. Inside Iran, newly elected President Mossad Pezeshkian urged caution, warning that any reckless move could deal a heavy blow to the country's economy. Meanwhile, the United States deployed aircraft carriers, warships, and additional forces to the region. European and Asian governments began evacuating their citizens from Lebanon and Iran. Billions were wiped from the Tehran Stock Exchange in a single day. On the ground, the picture was tense: funerals, mass gatherings, and public demonstrations. In the skies, disruptions were reported in GPS signals. In cyberspace, attacks targeted websites and infrastructure. The entire world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an escalation that could turn one targeted operation into a regional crisis. But days passed, and no direct retaliation followed. Israel prepared for the worst. America reinforced its allies, while Iran delayed its final decision. Haniyeh's death became more than just an event. It turned into a symbol, a reminder that even figures surrounded by the highest levels of security are not beyond reach. And perhaps most importantly, it became a potential spark, capable of disrupting a fragile balance and transforming a long, shadow war into an open confrontation. Who do you think might become the next target in this ongoing conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you for watching.